Happy Sunday. Friends, lovers, thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. I'm Robert Nasir. I'm here with Amy Nasir.
Special guest.
It's time to rock out. The extra special guest. Oh my God.
That's right.
Baby Rona time.
Baby Rona!
Amy's here anyway.
Baby Rona.
That's right. Let's talk about that. Today is Sunday, May 15th, 2022, the 135th day of this, your best year yet. You've got 230 days left. No. Don't waste any time. It's only 37 days until summer in the northern hemisphere. You people in the southern hemisphere, you're in fall. Winter's coming. Do they even have winter? Does it snow in Australia? God only knows.
Mini winter in July for Christmas.
Oh, man. Today, May 15th, 1982. No, May 15th, 1982 is when Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder, and their hit song Ebony and Ivory hit #1 in the Billboard Top 100 and stayed there for 7 weeks.
That's great. That's a great song.
I love that. I just absolutely love that. And that is going to get us where we want to go today. Now, Ebony and Ivory got a lot of critical heat at the time.
Did it?
Because it was considered by the critics, by the people at Rolling Stone magazine, to be kind of schmaltzy. And this is 1982. 1982. This is the heyday of both new wave and punk rock. But I love it. I love Ebony and Ivory. I love the old Three Dog Night song, Black and White. I love the Michael Jackson song, Black or White. Man, solving race issues was so much easier back then. You wrote a song, you got together, it didn't matter what color anybody was, and you just did stuff. It was so cool.
That's right. You celebrated your commonality as a reasonable human being.
Damn right.
Is so good.
I'm telling you, 1980s were the best time for everything. And the solution to racism was, unlike what they tell you nowadays, stop being a friggin' racist. This connects to exactly what we need to talk about, and I'll tell you why. Well, first, real quick, happy birthday to Ahmet Zappa.
Huh.
Now, we've talked about Dweezil Zappa before and Moon Unit Zappa before. Ahmet isn't the strangest name, because if you're a big Yes fan or Atlantic Records fan like me, you know that Ahmet Ertegun ran Atlantic Records for years, and that's who Frank Zappa named his kid after. So Ahmet Zappa, happy birthday. Born 1974, so he's 48 years old today. Also born on this date, we're talking music, so Mike Oldfield, who I never got into as a musician, but Tubular Bells was everywhere, gave me nightmares, from the theme song to The Exorcist. He was actually a great musician, above and beyond that. Born this day, 1953, 68 years old. Happy birthday, Mike. And finally, Brian Eno, also still alive, kicking, and performing. Born 1943. He's 74 years old. Brian Eno is one of those guys who, you picture him touring with the Talking Heads or working with David Bowie. It just seems forever young. This is a guy who's never going to get older. Maybe he hasn't.
No, he hasn't. I mean, he started off really old. If you look at pictures of him in his avant-garde, 70s style, he's got gray hair. He looks like the Crypt Keeper, except a little younger. It's really cool.
Very, very cool. Here, I'm going to close a couple things here because I got to keep up on the chat. Best part of the show is you good people out there. So those happy birthdays go out. Also, finally, about this date, May 15th, it's National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. So we've got the National Chocolate Chip Cookie here. This one came, if you know Southeast Michigan, this came from Westbourne Market.
Nom, 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 nom,
and it's hard to find one like this where it's actually baked properly. Everybody wants soft cookies, and the manufacturer's way of doing that is under-bake everything.
Well, it's because I think people like that cookie dough feel, raw cookie dough.
Terrible. The only reason a cookie should be soft, and cookies should be soft, but the only reason a cookie should be soft is because it's warm. It just came out of the oven. Don't underbake them to make them soft. That's a crappy way to make a soft cookie. If you want a cookie to be soft that's already cooled down, just stick it in the microwave for about 10 seconds. Don't overdo it. That is the way. But speaking of the way, well, we're going to talk about the way. But it is National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, so make sure you are enjoying your National Chocolate Chip Cookie if you haven't jumped on that holiday already.
Are we going to eat that?
We are going to eat that. Actually, it's funny. Or maybe it's not funny. Actually, it's rude. It's totally punk rock. It's rude.
So rude, man.
I've got a glass of milk here. Look at that. I've got a cup of coffee here. Look at
so
that.
Offensive.
Now, when you do a video podcast, a video show, anything video, where like people can see you, you don't eat. It's rude. It's kind of like a lot of people find seeing somebody eat disgusting. Or at least you end up with chocolate chip cookie between your teeth.
And then you're trying to actually speak and you're like, nom, 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 nom.
But today we are punk rock.
But I mean, this could be punk rock cookie eating ASMR. That's what it is.
ASMR. I can almost remember what that stands for. You ASMR people, you know what we're talking about.
I forget what it is, but it's something about like, smacking your lips and whispering.
It's people who have who get frizzen from that. Their hair and their arms rises up and they get a special feeling from hearing certain sounds.
Frizzen or frizzen?
Frizzen. No, frizzen. Well, it's 2 S's.
Okay.
It looks like frizzen, but I believe it's frizzen. You folks look it up. It's not in the show notes, so you have to do that one yourself. But since it's National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, and I've done this once before, and I'm doing it once again, when you look at the show notes after the show, I have posted a link to, it's not that hard to Google search it, the DoubleTree Hotel official chocolate chip cookie recipe. Now, I would maintain that the DoubleTree Hotel has the best chocolate chip cookies.
They really are very good.
And they do keep them under the registry counter in a warmer. So when you go to the DoubleTree and you get a room for a night of debauchery, you know what I'm talking about, and they hand you a cookie, it's warm and it's fresh. It's not like it's been sitting there forever. Yes. I've also pointed to the Wikipedia article on chocolate chips, and this is important because chocolate chips were created with the invention of chocolate chip cookies. In 1937, with Ruth Graves Wakefield of the Toll House Inn in the town of Whitman, Massachusetts, added cut-up chunks of a semi-sweet Nestle chocolate bar to a cookie recipe. 1936. Do you realize chocolate chip cookies are under 100 years old?
How did humanity survive without
I don't
them?
know.
I don't understand it.
People have this vision of the old days when we didn't have running water or indoor plumbing.
And you had to go to the privy.
You had to go to the privy in order to perform your waste functions.
You had to wipe yourself with the corn cob.
Well, that was the good part of it. But they don't realize that 100 years ago we didn't even have chocolate chip cookies. That's brutal. I mean, bad enough that we didn't have modern medicine. But no cookies either. It's also funny because the Toll House Inn was an inn. And it had a sign out front, registered 1704. And it was built in the 1800s. And it wasn't a toll house. It never actually collected tolls for anything. And yet, when this gal, Ruth Graves Wakefield, contacted Nestle, said, hey, I will sell you this recipe as long as you... And what did she ask for? If you invented the chocolate chip cookie and you contact Nestle... and you're going to make them the official provider of this amazing new invention, what did she ask for? $10,000? $100,000? $1 million? $1 million? No. She got an arrangement with Nestle to give her free chocolate for the rest of her life.
Oh.
That's how that goes. So anyway, it is National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. Enjoy your chocolate chip cookie. Don't mind me if I'm eating while we're talking. I won't be wasting time. I'll be reading your chat comments. See, Allie says, yay, anarchy. That's right. Punk rock is anarchy. I mean, you don't get much more anarchy than, I am an antichrist. I am an anarchist. That's right.
Yeah. I've got better lyrics, by the way. We're going to be going down some of my favorite punk rock lyrics.
Oh, yeah, we're going to go a lot deeper than Sex Pistols. That's for sure.
So much deeper.
So what are we listening to this week? Well, the reason why we're talking about punk rock today is because what I was listening to this week was a bunch of punk rock. But also, we did a show on Thursday, and it was a show on the way of integrity.
The way.
This is the way. This is the path.
Spiral.
This is the journey. And for a lot of us, punk rock was part of the journey of coming out of childhood or coming out of conformity and finding independence, finding integrity, figuring out how to say to the rest of the world, hey, your governments, this is not okay. Or conformity, this is not okay. Going through punk rock was part of the way, part of that journey. We did a previous show, and that's why this episode is called Straight Edge Part 2. We did a show called Straight Edge. And the reason is Straight Edge was a movement. Okay, it started out as an album and a statement by the band Minor Threat, but it turned into a whole movement in the 1990s. It's the coolest thing, and we did a show on that. Link is in the show notes, our episode number, or whatever the heck that number was. Oh, I don't care what the number was, it's in there. Episode 85. So, link is in the show notes. That's what I'm listening to this week. I also listened to our Thursday show, which I thought was pretty damn good, on integrity. And finally, and what really made it that I got to talk about this today, is that on Friday, the Ayn Rand Center UK channel did an episode of their daily show, The Daily Objective, episode 499. Episode 500 is going to be the boss. Episode 499, and the episode was called Punk Rock. And it was pretty cool, right?
It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Jason Rines did a great job at, he explained, he kind of explained a little bit about, people's viewpoints on music in general, that it wasn't necessarily subjective. It kind of was, but not really. And he talked about, kind of the basic background as you would expect about punk rock and nonconformity and all of that, and what it meant to him, which was really nice. And then him and Rucka explained some of their favorite lyrics. And at some point, I'm hoping that I'll be able to do a show with the two of them, and maybe even bring in Amish Adalgisa, because Amish, the world famous epidemiologist, is a punk rocker, and his favorite band are the Ramones, and he also likes the Dead Milkmen. Speaking of milkmen, you're gonna eat your cookie, right?
You keep talking. I'm working on the cookie here. I'm gonna get back into it, but as long as you're talking, I'm reading the chat.
Yeah, read that.
There's some great
so
stuff
great,
in the chat.
So great.
And it's good too, because there's a lot of people on YouTube. I know Facebook is more convenient for some people, but we're trying to get our Facebook numbers up. So anybody wants to jump over to YouTube, bring those numbers.
I'm going to go ahead and put that YouTube.
Like and share, all that good stuff. Anyway, you keep talking. I'm going to take a bite of this cookie.
Like and share.
I'm sure I will not eat the whole thing during the show, but I got to get a bite of it.
And rock out. Okay, there we go. Here's the...
I'm going to do the dipping too. This is nasty.
Do the dip.
So messy. I do have napkins.
Oh, good.
Oh, look at this.
ASMR. Cookie ASMR.
There ought to be a
beautiful. All right. Yeah, so, we've explained in the past, in our past episodes, straight edge, what straight edge means. And, now,
no drugs.
Yeah, no drugs.
No booze.
No,
no promiscuous sex. Treat women right.
Sex, no stupid sex. And especially no religion, which was really great.
That was really controversial in the 1980s.
It really
late
was.
70s.
It really was. I mean, I remember...
People think conservatives are like, oh, there's so much religion. Man, if you weren't around in the late 70s, you don't even know.
When people talked of the word atheist, people, they were, literally shocked out of their seats. And people couldn't believe it, and just, visions of hellfire and brimstone and eternal damnation, went through their heads. And it was really a scary thing for people to even consider that. By the way, Jim in Facebook, he mentions my shirt here. It's sort of like a punk rock fish, sort of a goth fish, so nice. Real sweet.
Yeah. Although it's also a shout out to Jennifer.
Yeah, that's right. You went to...
Because you missed it, but I went to Bonefish.
Yeah, I had
a semi-fancy casual restaurant, Southeast Michigan. They're all over the country. So you've got the Bonefish on your shirt, even though you couldn't make it because why couldn't you make it?
I had Baby Rona.
Baby Rona.
And what that means is that thank you, Caitlin Curico and Drew Weissman for developing the mRNA technology to create the vaccines, because I got the shots at first, and then I got a booster, and I may have gotten another booster, I forget. But anyway, I've been up to date on my shots and everything like that, and then I caught the Rona last Friday, and not 2 days ago, but a week before, and it hit me like it hit me like all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden, my sinuses were just sort of like swelling. And I'm like, what intonation is going on here? I'm thinking, well, I've got a head cold. But it came on really fast. And then the next morning, I went ahead and tested, and it came up positive. And I'm like, holy jeez. I mean, this is crazy. I can't believe I've got the Rona. And I was a little bit afraid, and everything. And I thought to myself, you know what? I got a dose of something. It was enough to actually get in me and do some symptoms and everything. And I had a bad headache, and I had a sore throat for the first few days, and I got a swollen gland, and I had a real slight fever. I got up to 99.4. Woo! Big fever for one day.
Now, do I remember right that you first tested on Monday morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I kept trying to test like almost every day, and like hoping it'll just go away, just to wish, but it didn't.
And it was a great test of these tests, because every time Amy tested, I tested, and every time she came up positive, and every time I came up, same test. So I think that speaks well to their accuracy. It also makes you wonder just how contagious is this, because we haven't done any isolating. I guess we've limited our swapping of possible vectors, but we ain't changed much about the way we're living.
Sadly, Robert and I aren't going hot and heavy right now.
Well, not as hot and heavy as usual. But I haven't caught it. I'm negative. Why didn't I get any? I feel so left out.
It's so crazy. It's like I'm sitting here. There's no plexiglass between us right now. See?
Like there was between William Shatner and me and Jennifer and Diana.
Right.
Oh, man.
Do you want to go into that? Or should I speak more? Okay.
No, we got to get a little more into the topic, and then we'll consider some of those diversions. But yes, Amy has had COVID-19 all week. And
last Sunday.
You think, well, okay, that makes us feel sorry for Amy, but why do you bring that up? What's it got to do with being punk rock? Well, the thing is, you can't stop Amy. Okay, first of all, here's Amy.
Oh, there I am.
In case anybody doesn't know just how punk rock Amy is.
Well, this is actually me in sort of a glamorous sort of look. This isn't for my senior photos.
Yeah, somewhere we've got pictures of you far less glamorous and more punk rock.
Much more punk rock.
Yeah.
And, okay, so you see, there you go. There's a good one. That's a nice look.
So sorry about the ones listening to the audio podcast, but I'm showing a photograph of Amy as a punk rocker.
Yeah. However, I should say this, everyday wear in high school here. This is when I was 18.
Yeah, well, these are senior pictures, so the daily version was more radical but less formal.
Yeah, so I went around high school, okay. They instituted, a little background on where I grew up. It was kind of white trashy, and I hated everybody, and everybody worked in factories and were depressed, and all the adults around me were just, drinking and smoking their lives away, and it was just really sad, and I just hated it.
Good reason to go punk rock.
It's the kind of town that you walk down the street, no matter who you were, no matter how young you were as a girl, you're going to have okay, by the way, there's going to be a lot of profanity in this episode, so close your ears up if you don't want to hear it. There were a lot of assholes driving around in pickup trucks, yelling out their windows, "Woohoo, baby!" All this stuff. Construction workers yelling at ya. I mean, it was just not a welcoming town for anybody who was slightly different, even slightly different, or a girl. Anyway, so I was really pissed, and in high school I would wear shirts like. We instituted a dress code in our high school for the last couple of years. So I took like a red shirt and I painted on it, support the LPHS, it's the name of my high school, dress code. And, get this, it's really shocking, but I actually put a Nazi symbol on my arm on the shirt right here. And it said support LPHS dress code. Because, I thought, that's, totalitarianism, Naziist kind of thing that you would do in a high school.
High school dress code is Nazism.
That's correct. It's fascism, it's Nazism.
Well, it was not Nazism, but it was stupid. And I think that was the point, is that this kind of stupid authoritarianism.
And I got to tell you, Robert, I wore that shirt at least a few times, and I didn't get any flack from any of the teachers.
Well, that might be a bad sign right there.
Oh my God, it was so great. And because people knew me, the teachers knew me, and they knew that I was intelligent, and they knew that I was a good person. And then there was another time I went around for Valentine's Day, and I bought a bunch of condoms.
Condoms.
And I put like little, I put out little cutout hearts on them, stuck them on the condom packages, and handed them out. You know, had like sayings on there like, you know, love comes in spurts, which is actually a punk rock song from Richard Hell and the Voidoids. It was great. It was so much fun. And it was really funny. I just absolutely loved it. And honestly, I was so isolated in my horrible little hick town. I just needed to express myself in these ways, and to kind of shake things up and to show people there was a different way of thinking. And I think I did. I think I influenced some people at the time. That I was, by the way, a Nietzschean existentialist. By the time you saw me in those photos just now, I was already reading Ayn Rand. I had already read Anthem and The Fountainhead and a little bit of Virtue of Selfishness. And at the time, I think when I was 18, I was in the middle of reading Atlas Shrugged. So you can kind of see, you know, you can't judge somebody by their looks.
Well, and the point, I want to make by the time we're done is that the way to rationality, the way to maturity, the way to the final version of you is not always simple or direct. Right. And for some of us, punk rock music played a role, and it did something substantial, and it helped us in that progression. Even though we've largely left that behind, there's still a lot that I connect to from the old days. Absolutely, and for sure. So it was great fun that the ARC UK did episode 499 on punk rock and brought me back to that previous discussion. Now, when we talked about this last time, we had a great discussion about morality, and we connected movies and music and how even if you hold the wrong moral code, virtues have to be rational to make you happy. You know, the example is the Al Capone or the Bernie Madoff, who really believes it's the kind of world where you have to cheat to get ahead, and therefore by cheating and getting ahead, couldn't he be happier? Couldn't he avoid guilt because he doesn't believe he's doing anything wrong? He thinks that's the way the world is. And I think we made the point that, no, that doesn't work. And it's been proven out in the cases of people like Capone, the case of people like Madoff, who were miserable because of what they did. I won't get into all of that now.
Before you do, pass the cookie, please.
Oh, yes. I've only had some, but that was plenty. You feel free to finish it up. Let me know if you want the glass of milk, too.
Anybody come on over, help us with the cookie.
Please help us finish off the cookies. I went to the market, and they wanted to sell me a big bag of these. And I'm like, man, one of those is enough. I think everybody knows I'm working on regaining my svelte figure. Here, I'll show you my svelte figure here. I was not a punk rocker. As you can see there, I was more of a new wave kind of guy. And to be that skinny again. This is 1984. If it's not obvious.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, I'm the guy in the center on the bass
guitar.
Super
hot. Look at Robert, super hot. Oh, yeah.
Those were the days.
His friend Larry in the tracksuit, and then his stepbrother Robbie with the skinny red tie.
Yeah, you can't tell, but Larry there is also playing keyboards. It's kind of off to the right of the picture.
Jim McHenry on drums.
Yep. Oh, those were the days. That was great.
And at that, honestly, if I wasn't in a hick town, I would have actually found some like-minded people and formed a band. But I couldn't find anybody to form a band with. By the time I got into college, it was just a bunch of pretentious, kids who lived in their parents' basements, who were so insecure that they looked at me like I was just some sort of girl, and or like some sort of like I don't know, what would you say? How would incels describe women?
Oh, I don't even want the ability to imagine that.
But they looked at me like that. And at the time, I was really getting into Ayn Rand, and I would tell people about her, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, she sucks." Blah blah blah. They didn't even read her, those cowards, and I called them as such. So
yes. Yeah, well, you called people out regularly.
I did.
When I see a picture like this, of course, I'm tempted to think, man, if only we had met each other then. But then I realize, oh, wait a minute. I was 21 in that picture, so you would have been about 12. Yeah, I guess that wouldn't have worked out too well. It's a good thing we didn't find each other until later. The old days. But the thing that might have been missing a little bit from Friday's presentation about punk rock, though, I've mentioned before the 80s are the best decade ever, the last decade of optimism, the greatest music ever produced. Maybe balance that with the 70s a little, but the funny thing is, and I think we all do this, when I think of the 80s, I think of a certain kind of music in the 80s.
Yeah.
There was so much schmaltz. There was so... And
So
do
much
this.
schmaltz.
Figure out the year, whatever your decade is, whether it's the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, whatever you think was the best music ever. And then pick any week or any month, pick your birthday, that can be fun. And do a quick Google search or internet search for what were the top 40 songs that week.
Yeah.
And you will be surprised, unless you've done this before, just how horrible they were. Just how much schmaltz, how much... Oh, no wonder I forgot that song. Looking back, it really wasn't... And, you know, it probably was clever enough, and it had some hooks and had some things that made it popular at the time. But when I say the 80s are the greatest decade, I am fully aware that it's my version of the 80s. When we talk about Amy in the 80s, Amy's 80s is much more benevolent,
Yeah.
much more stylish, much more happening,
Yeah,
much more fun.
Yeah, and edgy too.
And
you
edgy.
know, and clever and intellectual. And there's so much good stuff in the 80s that people miss because they see the schmaltz. You know,
Yes.
they're you know, they were, you know, 20-year-olds today. You know, I think they're getting back into the 80s and kind of researching a bit, kind of like how I did when I was a teenager, and all I could do was just find out all that I could about late 70s punk rock. And there wasn't a lot of information out there, but I did get a lot of information at the time, and because I just wanted to live at that time, and I felt that I really missed out on that.
So to us, it doesn't really matter that the 80s also included Debbie Gibson or Tiffany or not that there's anything wrong with that.
You know, or even just stupid like yacht rock of the 80s.
So much yacht rock.
And
what happened to Steely Dan and Michael McDonald and the Doobie Brothers and REO Speedwagon, which used to be a rock band before the 80s.
Some of it was so horrible.
So the greatest thing about the 80s was amazing dance music,
Yes.
outstanding new wave music. There was some great punk rock music in the 80s. For those of you who like, I think Gangsta Paddington's in the chat. So yes, hip-hop, rap music. The 80s were great, except for the parts that weren't.
Yes.
And again, for a lot of us, as we were escaping some of the conventionality of our childhoods and our families and the communities that we were in, you know, punk rock was a way of saying, this is not acceptable. Conformity is not acceptable. Secondhand thinking is not acceptable. Passivity is not acceptable. And, you know, the kind of energy that we found in punk rock was often misdirected. You know, Fear was one of my favorite bands, and they're downright nihilistic.
Oh, Fear.
Because although
my God.
they're great at condemning things that deserve to be condemned,
Yes.
but they didn't fight for anything positive. It was just making the point that,
Yeah.
you know, war sucks, and you know, New York's all right if you like saxophones. And
it was like satire, you know.
it was satirical.
It's very satirical. There isn't. I'm honestly, punk rock, or especially early punk rock, could not have existed without satire, and it was so clever, and a lot of it was downright intellectual. Well, compared to the songs, you know, that were playing on the radio.
So you had some examples. Maybe you could read a few lyrics
Sure.
from the bands you thought did have something to say and not just condemn.
Before I forget, I want to mention my very favorite band at the time, because now I don't know exactly what my favorite band is, because I just like them all. But at the time when I was about the same age as you saw me in those pictures, my favorite band was No Means No. So
No
that's
Means No.
all one word.
Link is in the show notes to
No
one of their
Means
videos.
No. They're a Canadian band from Vancouver. I loved Canadian
punk rockers. Imagine
punk and
that.
hardcore bands. Very good stuff. Very polite yet edgy. No, I'm kidding. They weren't. Well, I mean, they were nice.
It's funny too, though, because you think, well, punk rock implies a punk version of rock music.
Yeah.
And then the question would be, but is there punk, like punk jazz?
So No Means No. What they did, they were basically trained as jazz musicians. These two brothers. Ironically, their last name was Wright, so they called them the Wright brothers, right? And and they were so good at their instrumentation. I mean, mad skills good, and so amazing with their vocal harmonies. Yet they were extremely hard hitting and extremely clever. Quite intellectual. You know, a lot of it was, complaining about hypocrisy, complaining about inconsistent ideas, complaining about, bad people, and also being very overly dramatic about things, which was great because it's exactly what I loved. And but my God, I mean, it's the kind of music that really gets you, and a lot of it people will not appreciate, but it gave me a sense of, along with these other bands I'll be talking about, moral indignation or like moral righteousness. At the time you had the moral majority, and you had, all of these, in the political realm, it was, say no to drugs, don't question these laws, drug laws. Don't question anything out there. People were just sending money constantly to, people like Tammy Faye Baker and Jerry Falwell and all of these.
Yeah, it's easy to remember.
Religious televangelists.
We can think of Ronald Reagan as, well, he was great in foreign policy, at least he was strong. But you forget the Christian Coalition.
Oh, yeah.
You forget the PMRC and
Yes.
the fights against profanity.
Yeah, the PMRC headed up by Tipper Gore, wife of
Al
Al Gore. So it wasn't just
there was
coming
crossing
from the
the
right.
aisle.
It was coming from the left. I mean, it was the time that the Clintons were like, in the 90s, early 90s, oh yeah, they're totally against gay marriage. Marriage should be with a man and a woman. All this other stuff, I mean, just the culture, politically, the culture was really screwed up, and but there are some really excellent examples here of I'll give you one. This is one you have not yet heard about, Robert. This is from a band. This song was released, I think, the mid-'80s. It's called "When the Shit Hits the Fan." And let me do a quick reading here, and you tell me what you think about this. In a sluggish economy, inflation, recession, it's the land of the free.
These are song lyrics?
Yes.
In a sluggish economy, inflation, recession in the land of the free.
Wait in unemployment lines, blame the government for hard times. We just get by however we can. We all have to duck when the shit hits the fan. 10 kids in a Cadillac stand in lines for welfare checks. Let's all leech off the state. Gee, the money's really great. Soup lines, free loaves of bread, 5-pound blocks of cheese, bags of groceries. Social Security has run out on you and me. We do whatever we can. Gotta duck when the shit hits the fan.
Well, that sounds like it could have been written like now.
Now. And I mean, okay, so this was kind of before the whole. This is when the alternative music, punk bands, hardcore bands were questioning everything, and they were not afraid to, throw some shade at the leftist politicians. They were not afraid to do that, and it's great. It's so good. So that's the Circle Jerks, if anybody's interested. Circle Jerks, hint, hint. innuendo, yada yada.
That's not innuendo. That's explicit.
Right. Here's another one. Okay, this was in the 90s. So a little history. There's a guy named Henry Rollins who was a Nietzschean existentialist. He was the lead singer for a band called Black Flag in the 80s for quite a long time. He split off from there in the 90s and he formed the Rollins Band. So Henry Rollins.
Yeah, and nowadays he goes out and does spoken word.
Yeah, he does spoken word. He's a leftist intellectual. I'd call him leftist because I recently saw him, I don't know, a few years ago, and he's not particularly objective with a lot of things. In some things he's good, but in other areas he's got some explaining. And
he was more independent for a while, and he seems more leftist now than he was back then.
Right, because there's a lot of confusion right now. I think a lot of leftists are trying to figure it all out, and they really can't. So this is a song called Low Self-Opinion, and it's a great rockin' song, and it's so powerful and dramatic, and he's talking about psychology and the importance of introspection, and so it goes, I think you got a low self-opinion, man. I see you standing all by yourself, unable to express the pain of your distress. You withdraw deeper inside. You alienate yourself and everybody else. They wonder what's on your mind. They got so tired of you and your self-ridicule, they wrote you off and left you behind. You sleep alone at night. You never wonder why all this bitterness wells up inside you. You always victimize so you can criticize yourself and all those around you. The hatred you project does nothing to protect you. You leave yourself so exposed. You want to open up. When someone says lighten up, you find all your doors closed. Get yourself a break from self-rejection. Try some introspection and you just might find it's not so bad. And anyway, at the end of the day, all you have is yourself and your mind. So there's it's just part of it. But I'll tell you, that's from the early 90s, 92. And, as far as I know, let me know if you know of any bands out there who are writing lyrics like this, because it just doesn't seem like there is any. Yeah. I guess there's Apollo says there's a song called Self-Esteem by Offspring. Yeah, Offspring came after that, but...
Yeah, and then, of course, they were brought up by Rucka on the Friday show, that being his favorite alternative punk band.
Yeah, and I'll keep going if you want me to.
Give us one more if you've got the lyrics handy.
I've got so many lyrics, I don't even know where exactly. Geez. So...
well, I didn't mean to pin you down to one.
Let me give you Straight Edge by Minor Threat. Now, Minor Threat, headed up by Ian MacKaye, Washington, D.C. hardcore punk scene, early 80s. They were like 16, 17-year-old kids, still in high school. And a little story about the band and Ian MacKaye. He, at the time that he was in high school still, he petitioned the government, the state government, I think, to, they basically said, you know what, we're working, we've got jobs, we've got a band, we go to school, but we're working and we're paying taxes and we can't vote. And so he tried to enact a law that would give the right to vote to high school kids who were working, because they're paying taxes. Anyway. So this is called Straight Edge. Now, we explained in the one episode previously last year about Straight Edge. Straight Edge was basically a kind of punk ethos, hardcore punk ethos, that was anti-drinking, anti-drugs, mindless promiscuity, and anti-religion. So in other words, they looked around them, they saw all the crutches that people used, going to the bar after work so you can forget about your job, and and chain smoking because you're nervous and you've got a lot of cycle, you just have problems that you're not addressing. People who basically live a lie, and they see all of this around them, and they write a song like Straight Edge. So I'm a person just like you. I've got better things to do than sit around and fuck my head, hang out with the living dead, snort white shit up my nose, pass out at shows. I don't even think about speed. That's something I just don't need. I've got straight edge. And I'm a person just like you. I got better things to do. I can sit around and smoke dope because I know I can cope. Laugh at the thought of eating lewds. Laugh at the thought of sniffing glue. Always going to keep in touch. Never want to use a crutch. The implication here is it's a pro-reality, reality-based perspective, and that you don't want to distract yourself with self-destructive habits and other things like that. That's going to cause you unhappiness.
Yeah, it was a big surprise when we did that show last October, because we wanted to talk about straight edge, the straight edge movement that was started by Minor Threat and ran through the 80s, and and then it kind of waned, and we didn't hear about it, and we're like, yeah, this was a great thing. And I go to research this, and I spend some time on it. I find out it was a whole movement that came about again in the 90s, and now there's an annual convention called Edge Fest of straight edge people who are like, yeah, no drugs, no alcohol, live straight. And punk rock, it's not that they're passive, they're just... No, if you want to fight the system, the last thing you want to do is be stoned, or be drunk, or be sleeping around, or be spending your time in church. That was cool. It's very cool to know that straight edge is still a thing, well after the days of Minor Threat. And it's got content, it's got substance.
Yeah.
And
it's really it's powerful hitting.
It is.
It's fast, it's loud, it wakes you up. They've got the double bass drum going, and it's just
now,
so
some
good.
folks are mentioning music with a punk rock attitude. For example, The Offspring, Pretty Fly for a White Guy, Come Out and Play. Those are more, to me, those are more hard rock songs.
Yeah.
Those aren't punk rock. Well, they got the punk rock, the kind of complainy sound in their voice.
Yeah.
And the ha-ha-ha attitude, but what's missing is the urgency.
Yeah.
It's almost more like parody music.
Right.
Whereas punk rock is fast. Punk rock is high energy. Not because the guitars are distorted, but because of the way the actual instruments, and they use actual instruments, are played.
Right.
So I think some of the modern punk rock, that's what I want to see more of, is music that sounds like a bunch of guys actually playing music.
Yeah.
Because that's the energy you want in punk rock music.
And and I think that we've been taking the Tal Safani Happiness Team, going on with that. We've been trying to Robert's doing a great job compiling all these ideas of other people, and we talked about integrity on Life on Earth last time, and not fudging our beliefs in front of people, but respecting ourselves and respecting the listener. To give them your straight thoughts, so a lot of this stuff brings me back to that context of I didn't want to drown in the mediocrity of my town. Heck, that rhymes. Write that down as a lyric. But I wanted to wake myself up. I wanted to stir, my own soul. I wanted to make myself feel urgent about it because it was urgent. And I wanted to get out of that town, and I wanted to get away from those people, and I did. And I did a lot of things that I didn't think I could do, but I did, because I stirred myself up. I mustered, the confidence that I lacked. And I did it. I experienced a lot of things in life so far. I still have more to do, but it's really helpful for me, and I think hopefully you guys, to say, you know what, sometimes you got to stir yourself up, challenge your premises, challenge your assumptions, challenge what you think about yourself, whether or not it's true, and give yourself, and open up your options, open the world up to yourself, and say, you know what, I am sick of living in a rut. I'm sick of oppressing myself. I'm sick of being down about the things that I see around me, and I'm gonna get the hell out of here. Not necessarily literally, but I'm gonna turn over a new leaf, or however you want to put it. We are capable of much more than we think that we are, and if that punk rock ethos helps, that's great. Certainly has helped me.
Punk rock is outstanding for railing against hypocrisy and second-handedness. And for a lot of us on our journey to integrity and independence, it was very helpful. And some people might be saying, well, yeah, but why punk rock? You can come up with better ideas without going through that semi-nihilistic, hard rock music. And for a lot of us, that was the journey. That was part of the journey. It was a section of that. It took us where we needed to go at the time.
Yep.
But I don't want to excuse it. So one of the last things I want to say, we talked on Thursday, and if you didn't hear it, you should hear it. We talked about The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. And the point is, it's a way, it's a path, it's a journey. You don't research integrity, figure out, oh, here's what it means to actually act in accordance with what you really believe, and then put that into effect. It's a craft, it's not a science, it's an art. It takes work, and you can't know everything you need to know until you've actually taken some action and actually seen what that means in real life. The point is, it's a way, and she calls it the way of integrity, for example. And the honest man or woman, who goes through a difficult journey, like we did, like many of you have done, like some of you are still doing, the honest man who goes through a difficult journey, who bends rules, or violates principles because he's in an impossible situation, because of his culture, because of society, because of his family, just because of the state of his knowledge. He's in a no-win, Sophie's choice kind of context. The honest man has one characteristic that marks him as an honest man. Whether he does the wrong thing for the wrong reasons or the wrong thing for the right reasons. You think of the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, think about the slap at the Oscars, Will Smith and Chris Rock. Or think about somebody who does the wrong thing for the right reasons. Your child is starving, you're walking down the street, you pass a bakery, you break in and steal a loaf of bread. Think of Les Miserables. Whether he does the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, he does the wrong thing for the right reasons, he goes through a punk rock phase and is somewhat nihilistic and maybe even does some harm to his psychology, but straightens out a lot of tangled messes. Here's the thing. Here's the mark of the honest man. He's willing to pay the price and make amends. Mm-hmm. He is willing to pay his dues. The better of those who went through a journey of rebellion against government overreach or an irrational culture, the better people are willing to be judged. The person you need to stay away from is the one who says, yeah, I went through a lot of stuff, but you can't hold me against that. I was young and stupid, or this, that, and the other thing. No. The honest man, he's willing to be judged. I am willing to be judged on the stupid things that I did when I was young, or the things that weren't necessarily stupid, but that I only did because of what I was going through. Yeah. The better people, to the extent that such people exist, they're willing not just to pay their dues, but to acknowledge what they went through.
Mm-hmm.
If the way, the journey, the path, if the way includes incurring some debt, whether it's a financial debt or a spiritual, moral debt, the good man does not resent paying that debt once the journey is complete. And that's why I'm willing to say, man, I love punk rock. I never listen to it. I do listen to it now and then, but no, it's not my thing anymore. But it really got me through some challenging times, not just in life, but intellectually, spiritually. And for some of you, it's not going to be punk rock. It might be other things you went through that you don't ever want to do again. But it got you where you needed to go. And you can be proud of that if you're willing to say, yeah, there were things that were wrong with that. And, if I hurt anybody's feelings or if I screwed anything up at the time, I'm willing to pay for that. And still be able to look at yourself and say, but that's okay. It got me where I needed to go. If punk rock for you was part of the way, or if it was some other thing in music, or some other thing in the arts, or some other aspect of your life, and if there were costs you were willing to pay those dues, then it's a good thing. And that is why I can say I still love punk rock.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to integrate it into your life and why you liked it then, what your context was at that time, understand what you did wrong if you did anything wrong. I only did a couple things wrong when I was at that age. And this is after I read Ayn Rand, actually. I was still learning. I was still trying to figure things out. And it wasn't so much anything I did in high school. It was more of college. just a couple things. But I made amends for them immediately, actually. And because I was such a moralist from as young as I could remember. There, and but then I got into Nietzsche existentialism, and I got into this whole idea of like justifying acting on my emotions. That led me to a few things that I regret doing, but I did make amends for. I understood why I was doing them. I understood the psychology behind it. I understand what the philosophy behind it of what I was going through. I was, for more or less, it was kind of like Dominique Franken kinds of things that I did. And, I look back and I'm like, I understand what was going on here with me, and I can integrate it and say, I can identify it pretty clearly in my mind. So, and I, made amends with other people around me, so it was fine. But yeah, I think listening to like Minor Threat or Black Flag or even the Dead Kennedys, and especially No Means No, it really, sometimes I'm definitely in the mood for it. Sometimes I want to feel that moral indignation, and not in a malevolent way, not in a way to say, oh, those goddamn sheep, those sheeple, hate everybody, grr, not in that way, but more in like, I just felt like kind of like a moral cleanliness about it, especially Minor Threat, because they were such an honest band, and they were so morally clean. You got to listen to them, honestly. It was so good.
Or maybe you don't. Depends on where you're at. But if you want to understand at least what Amy's saying, links are in the show notes. You should listen to a couple of those songs. Too much in the chat for me to remark on all of it, but a lot of good comments, and I'll be rereading them at the end. But one thing that stands out is that Jim, who always has intelligent things to say, says there are so many rock songs with bad lyrics and lyrics that make no sense. And there are some good ones. Unfortunately, many rock songs with well-written lyrics are dark or depressing. King Crimson, as an example, had some well-written lyrics, but their lyricist had a malevolent worldview. And I would go further, thank you, Jim, I would go further and say everything that Robert Fripp was associated with had such a mixed, well, since it's music, I can't say view, but I'll say sense of life, even though that's overstating it. So dark. And it's interesting, too, because Glenn Martin says, and generally low quality, out-of-tune music, so goes the culture, in that, they're talking about rock music. And rock music, popular music, is an interesting topic. I won't get into it too much. We've talked about it before, but the point is that it's very easy to criticize contemporary music, rock music. A lot of us, as those of us who are Ayn Rand fans or objectivists, even went through that phase of not listening to rock music at all when we realized, well, this is a lowbrow kind of music. It's got negative elements in it, so much distortion, so much screaming, such simplistic rhythms. No, we should be listening to classical music. And at some point, I think most of the people who did that, we threw away all of our rock record albums or took them to the resale shops, and we're only listening to Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff.
Very stupidly, I got rid of my mixtapes.
Amy did the same thing. A lot of us did that. And then what happened is 10, 20 years later, we realized, well, that was a mistake. And it wasn't that there wasn't music that was worth jettisoning, but it's simplistic to say, and that's rock and roll. Rock music is that.
So if you're young and you're listening to this, don't throw out your records and mixtapes.
Yes.
Not that you have mixtapes. Or your playlists. Don't get rid of them, because the value of them is to go back and bring yourself back to when you were a teenager and you were going through the things that you were going through, and integrating the thoughts that you and the emotions that you were. And that kind of perspective is very valuable.
Well, not only that, but you will often re-find the enormous value in the music that you had decided didn't have value in it. I would say half the stuff I got rid of, I don't miss. But half of it I do. And eventually I came to understand that although there are ways in which, for example, orchestral music, what people call classical music, although classical is also a period, when people say that is superior music, there are substantial ways in which it is. And yet, it's interesting that people want to be very critical of rock music or other types of contemporary music. They're not critical in the same way of music from 50 years ago or 100 years ago, the so-called Great American Songbook. So as great as orchestral music is, symphonic music is, there is still room for songs. And that can be the Great American Songbook, or that can be 50s rock and roll, or that can be contemporary rock music, or country music, or jazz music, or whatever your preferred genre is. Don't be too quick not to set that aside and discover other things and decide, I'm not listening to rock music now. Don't throw that stuff away. Trust me on this one. It may turn out to be your copper pot. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to explain what that means, but if you look it up, you will find our shows on that as well.
Copper pot, before we go, I gotta answer Jim on Facebook. He says, this is totally off topic, but right now I'm cooking 6 days worth of steel cut oats again on a gas burner.
Oh, ooh,
how can I
hard.
cook them on medium-low, like the instructions say, without burning the bottom layer of them?
I have an answer to that.
Like I did the last 2 times, even while I was stirring them. Go ahead.
What we had, I don't have a gas burner now. Back when I think I lived with my parents back then, we had, and you may have seen it, it is a mesh diffuser. It looks like, what does it look like? It's round. It looks almost like it's full of steel wool or something, but it's a lattice work of mesh steel.
It's like a trivet.
Like a trivet.
Yeah.
And what it does is it diffuses the heat.
Yeah.
Because yes, gas burners, even at their lowest settings, are going to have little burn spots. Now you can use either really thick stainless steel. You don't want copper because copper conducts too well. Mm-hmm. You really thick stainless steel pots and pans, which will tend to diffuse more because they're so thick. Or just, get a mesh diffuser, like a stainless steel trivet that sits on the burner and spreads things out better so you don't have that hot spot. Because you're right, even at the lowest setting, you're going to get little spots that are going to burn your oats or anything else that's really, really thick that you're cooking. That's my advice on that one.
That's a great advice. I mean, other than that, all I can think of is like a double boiler. You put a pot into a pot with water in the bigger pot.
Yeah, and that tempers the heat.
And that tempers it. But other than that, that's a really good suggestion, Robert.
Sometimes I miss having gas burners over electric because they really do give you that, they just burn. Oh, no, that's so cool. Until you want to cook something like a thick sauce or an oatmeal. So, yes, absolutely. In any event, another show that I thought would go very quickly that didn't. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Very much appreciated. And don't ever let anybody tell you your music is bad, your music is wrong. And yet, don't get resentful. Don't lash out back at them. You can say, with the biggest stones and the absolute pride, I get what you're saying. And I understand why you hold that judgment. Yeah. But I don't agree. And if there's anything wrong with what I'm listening to, I'm willing to pay those dues later. But this is what I need right now.
Right. Absolutely. And let me end with Jason. It was brought up about would Ayn Rand have said what you listen to in music is just not objective, or it's not life affirming, it's not whatever.
She would have said a lot of things, but she would not have said any of that.
Well, even if she did, it doesn't invalidate the fact that you valued that music when you did, for reasons that you did, in that specific context that you did. And I think she would understand, because she had her tiddlywink music. It was this real, extremely primitive lo-fi, with a scratchy sound music, of like Get Out and Get Under, and like military marches and other popular songs in the 1920s and 1910s that were very old-timey. And that's the stuff that she was born in 1905. So she grew up with this music, and it really brought her a sense of what the West would be like if she could move to the United States, which she eventually did, of course. And it was really meaningful to her. It was very meaningful to her. But some of the music is hokey. You could say it's just downright hokey and laughable and not serious at all. But you know what? I like it, actually.
Yeah, I would not describe it the way you're describing it.
Some people would think it would.
But I see the point you're making.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And don't ever give that stuff up.
Yes.
So I don't have homework for this week. So continue on with whatever you've been doing for the last week, because Lord knows that's what I'll be doing. My Post-it note for the week, I originally just wrote down a humorous one, which goes back to our discussions of Memento Mori. It's a quote from Stephen Wright, the comedian. He said, "I intend to live forever." So far, so good. You can read that however you like. Obviously, it's just funny, but, insights too. But I think I'm ready to replace that with what Amy just said. So I wrote it down while she said it. A great philosopher once said, "I don't want to drown in the mediocrity of my town." So I would go with that one. And, obviously your town isn't necessarily your city. It could be your culture.
Yes.
It could be your workplace. It could be anything where you feel like folks are dragging you down and you got to remind yourself,
yes,
I don't want to drown in the mediocrity of my town. So take that home with you. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a good 5 minutes.
Yes.
So the show notes, links for everything that you care about, including DoubleTree Hotel's chocolate chip cookie recipe, all the birthdays, all the stuff we talked about, but especially those past shows, The Way of Integrity, Straight Edge, the original one, the punk rock show on the ARC UK. All those links will be in the show notes right after the show. If you have suggestions for future episodes of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir and Amy Nasir, go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group, write them down, or put them in the chat here, and we will read them, and hopefully your idea will become a show. And you will get paid for that in gratitude and thank yous. And that's about all the budget we've got for that. Budget's a little bit tight. In fact, if you want to help with the budget, you could support the show financially. What do you mean support the show financially? It's such an enormous enterprise. Surely I can't afford that. But no, your modest contributions make a big difference. Go to robertnasir.com and you'll find a link to our PayPal, where you can make a one-time contribution, or Patreon, where you can make a monthly contribution. Thank you so much to those of you who are already doing that. And a new patron this month, thank you especially to you. No, thank you to all of you. You're all outstanding. Very much appreciated. And that's it. That's all we got. We'll do this again next Sunday, but thank you for joining us. As always, we wish you every success. We wish you to be flourishing, and we wish you whatever kind of music fires you up, gets you jazzed, makes you think, damn, this life is worth living. That's what I want you to strap on a pair of headphones and listen to. And as always, we wish you love.